Oh, good evening, everybody. The name is All-Star Vintager, and we are about to begin our next episode of In Character Universe. Thank you, everybody, for stopping on by. Hope you had a wonderful time with me and our next guest, who has been hailing from parts unknown for thousands of years. Well, that's what the database kind of says, but I'm trying to figure that out, whether or not. How did a plant live that long? What can drive something that... Oh, this is definitely outside my wheelhouse. Though then again, I've dealt with a lot more magical beings than anything else. But I guess this is a constant trend. But I guess that also goes to show that the endless frontier is full of wonderful, mysterious things that happen every now and then, too. Of science, of magic, of occult, and so many other things. But I believe we can probably get a better answer in detail. Well, let's welcome our next guest, Shu Mercury. Just give me a moment and we're going to be setting things up real quick. And due to some sort of magical interference or something else, the only thing we can really go with is technically a projection, if you will. So, let's pass them through, shall we? Hello?
Hello, hello, hello.
How you doing
Thank
today,
you.
Shu?
I'm doing great. Hello, Starva. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. So,
Mm-hmm.
so you didn't have much trouble crossing dimensions through here, or?
Not at all. But this current physical form can be can deal with. Words. Excuse me.
Sorry, I'm
Still working out some kinks.
Yep, same here too.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's just the weather that kind of makes things a little bit difficult. Just dealing with congestion and whatnot. But I guess for anybody that's kind of tuning in, or those that are unaware of your story, mind if you give a good introduction about yourself?
All right. Hello, everyone, and hello, people who have yet to know. Oh, my name is Shu Mercury. I'm a painted skin ghost. Similar a painted skin ghost. That. Yeah. Excuse me.
Yeah, take your time. Take your time.
A painted skin ghost who has been reborn thrice times into this current form. Who I've been thousands of years ago. I was a being of light. I was trapped into a mirror of Mercury by Dao sorcerers. In order to escape, I transformed part of my form into a flower. But doing so involved damaging the light that was originally composited by form. And at the end of that transformative state, in which I fused with a passing alchemist, the creature that I was before functionally no longer existed.
So what exactly is a painted skin ghost?
So that is often very specific to the ghosts themselves and to the story, but the almost unifying line is a creature or a demon or a ghost that disguises itself with a painted tapestry of a person in order to infiltrate normal human society. What they want is often not just comfort and succor at a place to belong, though that does often depend on the spirit. Spirit, ghost, demon, you'll often hear me use those interchangeably, as often those those creatures are treated often interchangeably, especially with those descriptors.
Hmm. So, how did you manage to come to Earth in the first place?
So it's like a shape-shifting monster? It is. Let's see. I came to Earth. Let's see, several thousand years ago, a meteor landed on in the middle of Heli, and that comet carried a being of light, that proceeded to change and distort the world around it. It's as whatever reflected on the wavelength changed the form underneath. Often, if living creatures were reflected in this light, quote unquote reflected, it's the light shone on them and they reflected it back. But whatever happened to them changed them entirely. They would become undying, twisted creatures, no longer in control of their own body.
Mm.
That creature is not quite functionally existent anymore. But that is how I arrived.
Hmm. And do you often have like any memories of like what those creatures looked like, or were they kind of incomprehensible? Did they have some like plant-like features, or how would you describe them?
Mm-hmm. Do you have a push to talk or something? It's cutting your audio a bit. Oh, is it?
Yeah, just a little bit of
Let's see.
interference. Maybe some noise gating or something that might be getting in the way.
Let's see. I have noise suppression off on Discord, so it shouldn't be an issue. Maybe that's just my speech at the moment.
Yeah, and that's just some technical difficulties that could get worked out.
At the moment. The plant features actually didn't manifest till, was it the second or third? The first rebirth. The second rebirth? Second rebirth. How many times has that happened? Anyways, yes, the second rebirth, when I had to force that. Beforehand, they just took the form of twisted creatures in which parts of twisted creatures whose bodies no longer worked along the same ways they want to, and often distorted into blades and various other implements. Even if the body was disarmed, often the creature itself wouldn't die until the entire thing was destroyed. And I don't remember much about what happens to the person inside after that, whether or not they truly died with that. I don't remember much of being that creature, unfortunately. All I remember is that creature was almost childlike. It came to this planet and realized that it didn't. It came here and didn't quite like what it saw, and started change and understood that if by touching things, it changed things, and took some amount of glee in that, like it was supposed to be here doing this.
Hmm. Yeah, so it's pretty much like a primal instinct that you were able to survive that way.
Yes, I would describe it as such. Like programming, I guess, is the term I would use now.
Hmm. Well, I would hate to be one of those creatures that get warped by that particular light, knowing that something like that undergoes such a huge metamorphosis wouldn't be exactly alive after that point.
Not traditionally alive. I think one of the best ways I come to describe to people is that it warped all the rules that made you human when it happened to you. Including the rules that said what your breaking point was of your body and of your mind, and when you were allowed to die.
Like crap.
The original creature didn't quite understand what it was doing to them. It saw, whenever it interacted with humans, it saw them as kind of weak and flawed and in need of adjustment. Except whenever the light was reflected in an actual reflective surface, and then it got a little confused because it could see what it was doing to the world around it, and it didn't know how to feel about it.
Now, for first contact with humans, how do they react to your presence initially?
They did not react well. By the time I first landed, the first things I were worth were some local wildlife and two unrecognizable creatures, and their technically first contact was dealing with those creatures, and not being quite sure how to deal with them other than just hacking them into too small pieces to affect the world around them, or completely obliterate them somehow. Word got out. The point of location was spreading out fast, to the point it was starting to become unmanageable, and various supernatural experts were consulted to try to find the end all be all of the situation.
So that would pretty much be the first encounter with the Taoists, right?
Yes.
And was it like a bit of a back and forth war between you two at that point, or how'd it go?
A little bit. They would often send in. They weren't entirely a singular. In fact, many of them did come from similar. They did from smaller groups, but many of them were for independent people who came for dealing with the problem and getting the big recognition and bounty that would come with it. But many of them did not deal well with their first contact with light being as well. Those who got to interact with, who got to see what happened to them the moment the light touched them, but also saw what happened to the reflections in their swords and how those were affected, start coming out with a plan. As I did notice that whenever I was reflected, that I would often falter or be confused.
Mm-hmm. And this is when they started bringing out the liquid mirror, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Thank you for reminding me of that. Yes, they acquired a mirror that was previously the tool of a weapon of a lunar deity that was used to redirect the sun and the moon's light, realizing that they could use that against me. And because in reflecting in those reflective surfaces, I would briefly inhabit those surfaces. So they managed to have the mirror capture me, and then using magic at no small cost to themselves. Many of those original DAOs who participated did not make it out.
Mm.
But at that point, I was in fact sealed into that mirror. The mirror itself, would describe as being Mercury, and while it did move and shape as you wanted to, it did functionally exist in an in-between state in which it was functionally a solid but malleable object. But it would ultimately lay down flat or adjust or form into pools wherever it landed. And also the very nature of the mirror, because it was meant to redirect divine lights, and the nature of Mercury itself. If I attempted to shape and warp the mirror, the shaping and warping would alter the light itself within, inevitably changing and distorting it. And the moment I realized that was what happening, the programming told me to stop. I needed to not let that happen. So at that point, after cleaning up the monsters as I could, they stopped me for the moment and sealed me. After that, they flooded the valley and sealed me at the bottom of the lake, with eventually allowing a man-made island to be built so that the seals could be checked on.
Mm.
And once that happened, many of the associates and families of the various DAOs who participated came together as a coalition to guard this location, and to observe the effects of it over the course of the years.
Wow. So how
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. How would you describe being sealed in this liquid mirror in the first place? Was it something you would not wish upon your even greatest enemy, or?
Oh, very much so. It was for much of it. It was an awful, insensate nightmare. Being fully aware of it. That's definitely what I can remember it. Luckily, much of that time has been broken or blanked out or otherwise corrupted. But at some point, the mirror could no longer handle following that programming of not altering the light, and willingly extended out a tiny branch of itself to transform from the light into a flower that poked up above the pond on the island where the mirror was sealed. And occasionally, the Taoists over across the generations would find it and destroy it. And unfortunately, that would involve losing a tiny bit of the mirror, and thus a tiny bit of the light.
So that mirror was definitely quite the annoyance to deal with every now and then, even throughout different parts of your reincarnations.
Yes. Unfortunately, naturally, as they had been destroying the flowers and taking a tiny bit of the mirror, that was also taking a tiny bit of the original being with it. And over the course of things, the sanctity and like their drive to continue defending the spot broke down, and subsequent generations realized there was power inherent to those mirror shards, both from the mirror itself and from the bits of the original whole, and from the fragments of the original light creature within them. And they were often peddled as medicines of immortality or dangerous alchemic reagents. So.
I mean, I can imagine.
So more.
Continue.
Sorry. So more or less, they did in fact turn me and the mirror into a farm for themselves. So.
Jesus Christ. I'm pretty sure with such properties like that, I'm pretty sure those particular clans would have kind of fallen on the wayside. You know, those that might have been intoxicated by that possibility of that power would be something to not ignore.
Oh yes, those. If there's anything I can be happy about, even if I can't, if I couldn't take my vengeance on the original perpetrators, their descendants very much fell into decadence and laxness, which very much allowed them to, allowed someone to attempt to free me. Not that multiple people haven't already tried, others hearing of the source of it, or others that I had managed to, well, not necessarily managed, but I suppose managed. I suppose if you had gotten your hands on one shard and you felt a little bit of you, felt a little part within you saying that you had to go to this lake and destroy the seals and pull the rest of whatever is growing these flowers out, then I suppose that counts as well. But over the course of time, their routines and their practices somewhat fell to the wayside. Enough that inevitably a alchemist also seeking the source of the mirror, finally he managed to make it to the island, largely unbothered by this point in the generations, largely unbothered by them. No more patrols, no more constant checking in on the seals. And from that point, the flower had actually been growing long enough for me to attempt to communicate with this alchemist. And I had directed them towards how to undo the seals and allow my release without further corrupting the light.
So would you say that this particular alchemist that you've managed to get in contact with, was they like the first friend I ever met, or were they more of an acquaintance, or how would you describe that particular relationship between you two?
Nowadays I would call them someone I remember very, very, very fondly, and it brings me no amount of grief that I can't remember everything about them, not every single little detail about their face. But yes, they would be one of my, I would say one of my first friends. Initially, I was just misleading them in order to get them to undo the seal so I could be released and re-release in all my power. And naturally, that would never mean them being the first victim. But destroying the seals, especially by themselves, was a very tedious process. And over the course of the time it took, at least a year, they told me all about the outside world, and now now as stuck in a reflective surface, the being I was now could see the outside world as it was, and even then, a part of me was a little sad that I had tried to destroy it for what little I could see before the flower was destroyed. And just on the time that they were getting to the final seal, I thought to myself, it'd be such a shame to destroy all this and not be able to see everything that they've described to me through this lens that I can see now. Before, inevitably, finally, the few studious members of those original clans finally caught wind and came to stop this.
And that's what unfortunately led to their possible or inevitable execution at that point, right?
Unfortunately, yes. I finally chased them down in court, and unfortunately, the island did mean that they were cornered. And once they had struck the alchemist down and left them bleeding out in front of me as the flower, I felt another pull, another one that had become stronger than the programming that said to follow through in the plan and to not allow the light to be distorted. Nowadays, I would describe that as a sadness and unwilling to let this person go. I suppose that's almost a form of love. So I willingly distorted the rest of the mirror and fused with their body.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I suppose, is the second rebirth. And once we were together and I was able to revive them, it allowed us to destroy the rest of the Taoist and escape into the night.
Mm-hmm.
The creature that I was no longer there, but a part of me still felt I need to collect the lost shards of myself that had been taken by them and sold off or otherwise lost to time to build myself back together. And so over the course of years, I accompanied them through the courts of multiple kings over long roads, and I got to see much of that world that they had described to me.
Mm-hmm. So I can imagine like the various places and locales that you've visited in order to even get those shards back. But I guess this also probably marks a point where in your life that maybe this path of revenge has finally taken some form of shape too.
Mm-hmm. I would say so, yes. Unfortunately, despite the fact that I bear what I can only hope is an approximation of their face and their likeness, the alchemist is no longer part of this body, and they've long departed.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, we fell in the employ of a young, brutal, and ambitious warlord. And despite my disdain for them, the alchemist and the warlord start to fall in love with one another. And on a fateful night, they intercepted an attack for an assassin meant to defeat them. Possibly, given the potency of the attack, possibly thinking that the warlord had me and not the alchemist.
So in a sense, they were kind of testing you.
Possibly, yes. And despite all my efforts, I couldn't stop the attack or stop the alchemist from taking the blow. And once the assassins were defeated, and the warlord held on to their dying body, they released me from their body and allowed me to inhabit that warlord. Now, is that the first or second? That's the second rebirth. Actually, I misspoke.
Oh.
And so, with the intentions of that I would help them fulfill their ambitions and defeat those who had sent the assassins. And it worked for a time.
For a time.
The battle was going very, very well in their favor. Both me and the warlord and I were filled with spite, fury, and the need to lash out against anything. Until at some point, at a critical moment, we both simply stopped moving. And at the time, I couldn't understand what was going on. Why had this happened? Part of me at the time, I blamed the warlord, but I realized part of it was me as well. The grief had finally caught up with us, and neither of us could move a muscle.
See, now I'm kind of dwelling at a bit of another question too, considering that you mentioned these rebirths.
All right.
So whenever you merge with a particular body, you can actually pinpoint what's on the host's mind, or you can feel the same emotions that they feel too, or is it more of like a symbiotic relationship? How does it really work out?
Functionally, it was symbiotic, yes, for the first and second rebirths at least. So the reason why I refer to them as rebirths is that my first fusion with the alchemist, I functionally was a part of their body that was also a separate part of my body as my own being. Our minds weren't quite intertwined. It was more of a symbiotic hosting relationship. Mm-hmm. Much of what even though if I was attached to their head and occupying much of their hair, most of their body was still very much human. They weren't as changed as I currently am now. Once I had fused with the warlord, things started to get a little different. The damage from the attack and the hasty fusion did mean at this point we were starting to share a mind, and I was inhabiting much more of their body, pushing it to new warped limits. When things start to appear as plants, however, is around the time of the first rebirth. Around the time of the second rebirth is where, while blades and stingers and such weren't a unusual feature, that's around during the second fusion with the warlord is when more insectile features began appearing.
Oh. So in a sense, you're kind of picking up some new mutations the more rebirths that you've gone through.
Yes.
More of like an evolution, if you will.
Yes. Like I'm picking up a piece of that person's nature through the changes that I'm inevitably going through that leave a permanent mark on how I'm shaped now.
Mm-hmm. And the current form you have now, would you say this is the more perfected form of yourself, or would you say there's still a bit more evolution to go through?
Perfected would be hard to say per se. This form is unfortunately, inevitably, irrevocably damaged by all it's gone through. I can make it stronger, but the information lost over the years and through the various damages are unfortunately hard to replace. And I don't quite know if any of it either really stacks up to the original light creature. The the ability to balefully transform other people into undying creatures is unfortunately they've been lost to me. Through other methods, I can change another person's body and transform them, but not to the same extent as that creature.
I'm gonna take that as a fortunately, since I don't think I want to see anybody getting contorted into some strange creature right in front of me. Just a thought.
Oh no, I entirely understand. No doing that while you're here. Understood.
Yeah. Because I don't think anybody, including our viewers, would actually be able to comprehend such a thing like that happening in front of them. It's like some sort of eldritch invocation, if you will.
Understood. Do not shock the viewers with the unknowable.
Yeah.
This is noted.
Yeah, because who knows? Someone might have like the greatest insight, and all of a sudden, boom, strange, noodly spaghetti monster from unknown origins just appears right in front of us, and that would probably get someone to lose their mind.
Definitely for her the best. In the end, I don't know if I want to return to the form that the light creature inevitably was, as I don't know how much of myself would inevitably come back to it. For all I describe of it being childish, and it was also pure of anything else, I don't know how much I would be able to keep if I returned to that creature, even if I knew how to do that.
I guess the more things lost, other things are gained too. I guess you gotta appreciate the things that you have now rather than the things that you lost along the way.
And inevitably, we are the consequences of our own history.
Indeed.
And so, I suppose to go back to what happened to the warlord, they're also unfortunately no longer truly a part of this final form, of this current form. Once we both stopped and the enemy forces had realized what was going on, they butchered and tore apart the body, which inevitably also came with its various losses of information. So to go over what I mean when I keep mentioning the loss of information, the individual shards of the mirror and also the parts of it that's still a part of me functionally act as information storages, and also stores some small parts of my body. When they're in a dormant state, when they're at a dormant state, or in a state in which they're, well, not necessarily dormant, but a fused state, they appear as blue and jewel white, like when they're no longer a part of our body, or if the part of them within the light activates that triggers, I'd say, a failsafe, in which they will begin to bloom into a flower, and the part of the shard will turn into a red seed-like structure, or in the head flower. That's when a seed can be extracted. But oftentimes that means that the information, whatever information was stored into the mirror before, has been destroyed, and now whatever information in it is something that belonged to the original host, or to the host that has now likely been destroyed. So coming close to death, in which a body takes too much damage, will cause those shards to start sprouting as the light within realizes that the storage within them is at risk of being destroyed, and they will take any chance they can get to potentially escape. In which they will inevitably destroy the information within and fill themselves with new information based on their current host.
So essentially, you need your host to be still alive for you to get that kind of information in the first place.
Yes, at least when it works for when the seeds are implanted into other people. Nowadays, though, after the warlord's body was torn to pieces, scattered, sent away to various places as trophies, what little shards of me remained in the body, and also through the various feeding through the various pieces of him left to carry in or modified otherwise, parts of me inevitably found host various apex vermin creatures or vermin-eating creatures, snakes, spiders, scorpions, all sorts of various others those animals. And the parts of me that remained in them were able to take control of those creatures and form back into this current body. This current body is, for all intents and purposes, a ghost or a spirit or a demon. The body itself is no longer functionally human in any way. It is an amalgam of the shards that managed to make it back to me.
Mm-hmm. So that explains like the different like appendages and the mouths and certain plant-like features as well. It's all just a mishmash of different kinds of poisonous and even caustic elements put together, correct?
Yes. So something that you might have heard of before is the concept of the jar of absolute poison, in which many highly toxic creatures and substances are put into a jar there, and inevitably the one toxic creature that survives at the top has been feeding on the rest of their bodies is so infused with their toxin that toxin must be beyond virulent. And I suppose you'd say I'm functionally the living concept of that now.
So realistically, you are damn near untouchable unless someone will get poisoned by that.
It's definitely not easy. No, they would have to definitely deal with that on their own ways. Have other ways of doing it, and naturally, attacks from other unprotected organic things will have a dangerous time trying to interact with me. At least if I'm not actively, at least in my unraveled state.
Unraveled.
So, especially what you're seeing right here and right now is, I suppose, the state without any of the painted skins.
Oh.
So parts of my body that were set off aside to be the two tapestries that I would use to both store information and also to disguise myself and to channel magic that I wouldn't normally have access to. So the layer the tapestry that is the white dress is the layer that I use to disguise as a human, and is also the tapestry that stores information about humans and their magic. And so long as I'm possessed of it, I can continue to use the various magics I've acquired, and especially what I can remember of the alchemist's magic. The black coat is what I've gathered from other spirit, is the layer that allows me my powers of other spirits and demons, and allows me to undergo more specific transformations into various of those creatures.
Mm-hmm. And how do you come across these particular painted skins? Is it something that you've managed to conjure up over time, or was it something that you've managed to gain resources for? How does it work?
So it does seem to depend on the creature. For me in particular, well, not to say that any other painted skin creatures are quite like me, but I've heard of many who are just I've heard of several who are just fox spirits who use the idea of this and a painted human skin to do it. Mine, however, are pieces of myself that I have allowed to come off and be focused into those creatures. Creatures and tapestries. As functionally, while there is the main body, much of the body is functionally a colony organism, I would say. and those are just two other separate parts of that colony that have been specialized for a purpose.
Hmm. I can imagine being very adaptive too, as to certain environments, stimuli, and surroundings. Practically, you're able to adapt to anything on the fly if you've kind of put some thought into it.
Yes, naturally, there's a limit to how much I can change or adapt to things, and after all, turning or using the properties of certain things often involves assuming their strengths and weaknesses or dealing with their limitations. For example, I can only access the human painted skin's abilities if I'm intentionally using using a form close to human.
Mm-hmm.
And for example, if I allow demonic transformations or the main body's transformations to happen, I'd lose much of the ability to access a lot of those magics and abilities. Or if, say, I'm separated from those skins.
Oh. Hmm.
Interesting. Hi, Kitsuki.
Okay, so we're gonna go back to the topic of the warlord, considering that you've had a very particular combat record. What would you describe your fighting style, or how do you usually fight in these kind of battlefields?
Let's see. In the original first rebirth, I would often act as a supplementary to the alchemists. They would use their techniques and magic, and I would supplement them by controlling their hair into various shapes, and use what magic I had taken from various demons at that point. As part of the warlord, the entire body is turned into a mess of blades, teeth, and stingers, and we together ran amok across that battlefield, destroying anything we got in their paths. Nowadays, I wouldn't say I'm restricted to, but I'd say I tend to prefer a much more controlled approach. In that while my preferred method of fighting is combining the alchemic magics with the poison and demonic magics. The alchemists themselves specialized in various. Well, they had access to other things, and I've learned other things. They specialized in various states of water, and I've deigned to keep that about them. Whether that's shifting water to a gas, liquid, or solid to various effects, or just otherwise using them as they need to. I've come to supplement that with the demon magic from the demon tapestry to use the various states of water as often mediums for those poisons.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will supplement that with either any weapons I've stored within my body, or with any transformations I can get away with at the time. I could also send off both the skins themselves to be their own, to be as functionally separate combatants, so that will mean separating them for myself with all the risk that entails, and whatever loss of powers that on the main body that entails.
Mm-hmm.
And in most situations, and I can also remove, at the cost of removing both of them, revert to transforming into various implements and into a massive stab of blades of poison, as you perhaps see me has right now.
Mm-hmm.
My usual go-to is often to figure out what their weaknesses are and engage them on their least preferred, on whatever their weaknesses are, whether that means changing the battlefield or states of it to get them on the wrong foot, or what they're least comfortable with. That does mean that I will really focus on my own strengths, and I can be tricked into relying on suboptimal things if I think it means. if I think it would be more reliable to aim at your weaknesses than my own strengths.
Mm-hmm. So I guess there's a bit of like a balance as to like how you can manage your poison, how you can also use those skins to really change the tide of the fight, but also if someone's kind of like a tactician or can pick up on certain aspects of that, they could probably turn that against you.
Yes, and I suppose the reliance on the reliance on various mediums of water. Mediums of water, what's that? Whether that's a fog or a mist or rain, does that mean that anyone who can otherwise alter the wind or the battlefield better than me can take that away from me?
Mm-hmm. So essentially, there were probably even battles where there were even people that could use magic in the field, right?
Yes. So naturally, there are parts, as the various shards that we have lost, they've often fallen to the hands of various other or magicians, sorcerers, other Taoists all across the world, and I've made it a part of myself to recover as much as them, on the hopes that they have as much information about either the original light creature and its purpose here, or of the original of the alchemist, if they're perhaps a part of me that does have that memory. That has not quite been so successful.
And I'm guessing on top of that too, when you say that there's also the possibilities of familiars being used as well, like magical creatures or even like spiritual beings also being conjured up in the middle of all this.
I would say so. Yes. On top of that, I have also had to deal with several other spirits, ghosts and demons who have also tried to take their luck with shards of me, or tried to, or just come into conflict them for various reasons.
So those shards must have been a really huge arms race then.
Unfortunately, so yes. When I first came to being, I naturally did not understand much about controlling a body itself and being the primary combatant, and that was something I had to get used to. And naturally naturally as well, the march of technology also had its own effects on how I've had to deal with things. Since then, one of the first major damages I've acquired, which is unfortunately responsible for me losing a lot of my information on speech and knowledge, was an alchemist at the early age of gunpowder, essentially torturing a seed of me and catching me off guard by firing the bullet into me. The moment it impacted, it bloomed into a flower and inevitably corrupted much of the knowledge of the other shards within my body.
Mm-hmm. Hence, how your speech has been affected by that.
Yes. Unfortunately, I'm not able to fluently speak many of the languages I was able to speak anymore, and parts of me still hesitate sometimes beforehand.
Mm-hmm. But if that's the case, would there be a possibility that you can maybe even restore some of those seeds, or do you actually have to like sacrifice a bit of yourself in order to do such a thing?
It's possible that maybe it's entirely possible. I don't quite entirely understand how to as well. If there was anyone who knew how to restore that information, then, or there was a part of me that knew how to restore that information, unfortunately, that part of me is long gone. I do have the benefit of being able of using both the tapestries as storage for anything important or anything critical I've kept, which is why I often keep information about techniques and magics I found in both of them, and also the important memories I don't want to lose. So I can back up and restore the information, but in order to extract the information from someone else, I will often need to remove a seed for myself, plant it in them, get them to the point of near death, where the flower will bloom, inevitably just destroying them and storing parts of their mind, so I can take it from them. Unfortunately, it also means taking bits of themselves as well, and writing everything down to document as an SCP file. Yes. Unfortunately, that does mean taking bits and pieces of them. I've come to find myself thinking things I wouldn't normally think, and remembering things I don't remember, as there's only so much I can do as I can imagine, and taking in so much information and knowledge that didn't belong to me can make things a little hazy.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the last thing I'll probably ask about the time you were meshed with the warlord. What was running through your mind during those warring periods up until the final battle?
I will say that something that has remained consistent is that I've personally had little regard for kings or warlords and for kings and warlords. I largely allowed the alchemist to work with me as an agent in the back, but I had little taste for the mass carnage and the age of chaos being wrought. I will say, I'm not quite the most restrained person about planting seeds and taking information from people if I think they'd be useful or acquiring that information I need to. But I don't particularly have a taste for conquest. Not anymore, at least.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Excuse me. I'd say above all, my goals now are to acquire as much information to my own person and of the original light creature and of the alchemist, and then deciding from there whether or not I have any chance of dealing with the consequences of how the creature landed here, or if I can otherwise preserve as much information as I can if something else were to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'll admit it was an act of, also to go back on the warlord, I'll admit it was an act of pure spite, but when I managed to come together with whatever else I could of the original of parts of me that were implanted in the warlord's body, and whatever else I could acquire of his scattered corpse, I'll admit I'd use the shards in there to transform his body into a centipede, implanted in my body as a weapon. I don't know if I hate the warlord that much anymore, but admittedly that does come into use. So. And comes to use as functionally a sword or another method of attack.
Okay. Moving on to another thing too. So, how would you describe your peaceful life after that? Or if it was a peaceful life to begin with?
Let's see. After that, I was functionally on my own. I had never, since both the fusions, I'd never been quite alone before, except with just shards of myself. I wandered at that time. I'd spent a lot of time wandering about, gathering what shards as I could, and remaining at keeping low attention as just a wandering as a wandering wastrel. Part of me wanted to continue to want to restore the mirror as much as I could, but instead of just for the sake of it, for also naturally going back on it, getting as much information on as much as I could of the original alchemist back, and creating their body and their face from the parts of me that came together. But that somewhat changed it changed for at least a little while when I ran into a scholar on the road, who, and oftentimes I would just tell them anyone who tried to help me or to leave me be until to just leave me be. We're just two travelers. We're just two travelers on the road. They can't possibly help me what I'm trying to do, but they continue to insist that in the oncoming storm that I come back to their home and take shelter. After that, they had taken me they had adopted me into their home for a while, allowing me to remain hidden. I think a part of them understood that I was not living, though my disguise as a human was at least to a certain extent controlled and perfected. At a certain point, however, that the scholar and their partner. Oh, sorry. Well, to be fair, I stayed there with the scholar and their partner and the rest of their household. At some point, however, the scholar accidentally caught sight of my form without the human tapestry, as I was attempting to rectify small mistakes on it to correct the form of the alchemist that I could barely remember. They ran afoul of it. They caught wind of a Taoist who, just so it happened, was one of the living descendants of that clan that was in control of containing me, and the Taoist gave them a seal that promised to ease the pain of the spirit living in his home and help them reach the afterlife, not realizing that it was meant to target me and separate me from the human skin. After a brief battle with the Taoist and managing to protect the scholar and their partner from any harm, I had managed to escape into the night. But since then, I've realized I've had some of the taste of just that nice quiet life, and in between trying to hunt down the shards, I'll often use my disguise to try to find somewhere secluded and where people won't question me living on my own. Through the years. So that hasn't ever really meant traveling even across countries throughout the years to stay hidden and continue my search.
So in a sense, you actually had a bit of maybe a bit of freedom to kind of think about certain things and reflect upon what you've gone through so far, and also kind of like reflect on some of the more intrinsic things you've learned about who's after you, the people that you've met, and ultimately the life that you've lived so far beyond those rebirths.
I would say so, yes. Other than yes, after the third rebirth in which I was by myself, I felt nothing but spite and spite towards humans. I wasn't outright hunting them down, but I didn't want to be associated with them. After that, I realized that what I was missing from those fusions was being around other people and enjoying the presence of humans and other beings, and realizing I didn't quite want to just completely disappear into nothing, or just let this world, or just wait until the rest of the world disappeared.
Hmm.
And I want to continue to interact with the world and be a part of it, as oftentimes selfish as it turned out when my identity was inevitably revealed.
I see. So I guess the last thing I can ask is, what has your journey been like in attaining the rest of those shards? Do you feel like you've been getting closer to achieving your goal? There's still a little bit more left, or how's that kind of been panning out?
I've I want to say I've I definitely have the majority of it. There are a couple other not quite creatures like me, but well, I suppose some of them might be wayward parts of me that couldn't find others and refused to come back to my main body. As after all, the creature I am now isn't the creature I was at either of my rebirths. So to them, I must seem like a stranger. I had to hunt down a few of those to try to recruit them back, or depending on where they are, choose to leave them be. And and the shards left that I haven't acquired back yet are there's while I've gotten back most of them, there's still a few scattered out that still reside in mortal hands. Some of them probably locked under various protections and safeties, whether or not they realize I'm coming for it or not.
Hmm.
Other than that, however, I realized as the more of the shards I acquire that had some of the original lights memory in it, the more I talk about it as the reason why I refer to what the original light creature was as programming is that I've started to realize that whatever the creature was functionally a creature that's been sent into a garden in order to wipe it a pest and prepare it, is how I could think of to describe it. Which means that even if I don't know what it was, something sent me here to this planet with intentions and plans, and depending how strong I am by the time it arrives, that means I could either have an effect on dealing with it, and I can figure out whether or not it means me permanent harm, or just this world as well. Now that I'm no longer a useful tool of it, and whether or not I can either escape or fight back against it.
Hmm.
And if it has to come down to escape, then at least I've acquired as much knowledge of humans as I can to escape with it.
Hmm. Oh, so I guess in a sense that you've been sent to Earth basically as a means to not only prepare humanity for this kind of thing, but also in the case that you've either fulfilled your mission or not, you'll be ready to kind of strike back at it or whatever kind of
Yes.
entity it is.
Well, I wouldn't say it necessarily prepared them. I think whatever the original purpose was, the original thing, whatever it was sent here originally for, did intend to wipe out the rest of the life on this planet. On this planet, and the rest of that is kind of something I've come to determine on my own. I don't entirely want this world to just disappear into nothing for reasons I don't understand. And if I can't protect this world, I'll try to remember it.
Hmm.
If there's anything I've come to learn, is that the loneliness can be unbearable.
Indeed, it is. I mean, to go at it in a world that you're not entirely familiar with, and so much more that you kind of feel aimless. And there's no direction that you can actually pinpoint other than the only way they can pretty much find a way is forward.
Sometimes I say over the years I've lived dozens, if not hundreds, of different lives, and sometimes I can't remember whether I personally lived that life in disguise, or if it's part of the memories of someone else that have just started bleeding into it.
Mm-hmm.
Either way, however, what I can remember is precious memories. I don't want to let go.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess this will be a good time then to move on to the submitted questions or any other questions that we can kind of throw into the mix.
All right.
So if anybody in chat has some questions as of now, while still looking the tag, let me see what we got. And so far we got one from Kitsuki. What is your favorite pastime?
I'd say through the years, while it is ultimately tied to my nature, I'd say painting has continued to be my favorite pastime through various mediums and the various advancements that mankind has made in painting. Even before, when it was just my own, I suppose, colors being applied to the tapestries to form my first disguises. His painting has always helped me feel in control and at peace with things.
Mm-hmm. So it's a bit more like therapeutic, if you will.
Yes. Even if whatever I'm painting on is inevitably destroyed within 100 years, a decade, the next year, I feel like I'm doing my work in remembering and preserving what I can, or inscribing an idea or imagination and onto something.
And what do you usually paint outside of like the tapestries? Mostly like figures or something else?
Let's see. The mediums I've done some architectural paint over the years, but yes, often I will say by complete coincidence, in recent years, I was struck with another bullet meant to cause me damage. I don't entirely know what was lost this time. That's somewhat concerning, I think I'll say. But that one included a lot of information about model figure painting, painting from the original host, and I suppose I've come to lead into that as well. And who knows? Maybe someone's next anime figure garage kit was painted by me in my off time. Don't lick it.
All right, we got a question from Kana. Can I poke the flower, or is it gonna kill me?
If you poke the flower itself, it should be fine. Just don't poke the stem, I want to say. What a revelation. The flower itself should be fine. However, I will say ticklish. So maybe poking the flower itself won't kill you, but who knows what kind of mood I might be in.
Mm-hmm. Stem? You mentioned stem. Why not touch the stem?
So the stem, as it's, I suppose, the flower itself is the growth of the seeds. The stem is most of what comprises the main core body that is built around the shards. So it's where much of the poisons are accumulating.
Hmm.
To be extracted or used otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Now that I think about it, how are you able to stream anyway?
So that knowledge also came with the inevitable knowledge of streamers and VTubers. That person had a lot going on the original person that Shard was in before Enterprising Hunter realized this weakness of mine and shot me with a bullet. That I'm still very concerned with whatever the original knowledge was assured with. I think it might be Prime of problem. I can't remember it, but it did also include a lot of knowledge about streamers and pop culture, and I suppose it's not too much of a stretch to say that wherever I currently am, it's the real Eldritch knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Where I currently am is being hidden as a normal person in their day-to-day life, and so I get to use some of that leisure time into stream.
So, even with that knowledge, I'm still kind of wondering. The technology that you have would be considered ancient by my standards at this point. But do you have like some sort of magical means, like some sort of dimensional mirror or some sort of like interface? I'm trying to piece this together so it just makes sense in my gearwork brain. Oh no, it's just
to contact you specifically or to stream, or sorry.
I mean, if anything, both.
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
So it is just it's mostly a typical setup enhanced by what magics I could use on them and other magics I did know that I could use on them. Then I don't quite have access to the same reality shifting abilities anymore, but a certain part of me has some familiarity with how to mess with some of those things.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
I see.
As far as the outside world is concerned, as far as the outside world is concerned, currently I'm just a normal person who minds a normal person that is, I suppose, what you would call a normal Hikimori who minds their own business and it disappears some nights.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows when this current life will meet the end of its rope, or another or a hunter or another creature or another rival inevitably finds me, or just something else forces me from this. But for now, I'm enjoying this quiet peace.
Mm-hmm. Okay, another question from Kitsuki. What are your thoughts on the non-human beings you met through your journeys? Does their existence or being surprise you, or did you expect them to exist?
So through much of my journey, I've definitely met various other non-human beings. A lot of my I did definitely interact a lot with various other spirits and demons. And while at the time I wasn't strictly a spirit or demon, and I learned much from them about how similar their beings constituted it, I suppose. The way a spirit or demon is formed is energy accumulating, often in something that isn't normally a sentient. Sometimes things that aren't even necessarily animals over the course of years, and they awaken to sentience. So I suppose that I do have a lot of kinship with them, and that I do have a lot of kinship with them, And even if me and various other creatures like that have come to blows, there's a lot that I've learned about them. And the form I have now is functionally a ghost or a spirit. And then as I travel through various other places, I've encountered creatures of very similar makeup, creatures very unlike that, other things that don't quite operate by any other rules on this earth. Something sometimes similar to the original to the original being. In fact, I've one one of the greatest losses I ever faced that didn't come with a damage to any of inherently a damage to any of my systems or the mirror shards, but I ran afoul of a ocean deity that whether or not they originally belonged to your oceans or not is unclear to me. But I ran afoul of them, and in turn they cursed me to be weakened by salt water.
An ocean deity.
Yes,
An ocean deity had a bone to pick with you.
yes.
What did you do?
That's honestly unsure. I must have been interacting strange. I think they must have not appreciated my presence around their followers, interacting with them, and interacting with them. Definitely not disrupting their plans and destroying their destroying their followers and plans. I'm not entirely sure what their plan is, but look, they told me there was only batteries and this into the sea was fine. You know, I can't I can't be held responsible for whatever strange plans, some very strange. I suppose they were mermaid like followers and deities wanted to do.
Hmm.
It was definitely, I believe, it was somewhere around the Atlantic Ocean. This happened. I think I convinced someone to run a boat into one of their manifestations.
And when you say manifestations, what do you mean by that?
It's hard to say if it was their true body or not, but I remember the vaguest. Oof, I even my even my mind doesn't like interacting with those deities. Hmm.
I
It,
I can kind of see now. It's just it's a it does feel like a relationship of oil and water. Only difference is that the oil is actually poison, and water definitely spreads that around a little bit too well. So that could actually have its own fair share of issues there too.
yes, and and as per the is it and as per the natural properties of salt water, often don't interact well with, yes, like you said, oil like or organic compounds. So naturally, it does make sense. I do. Then it just makes sense, and there was a certain amount of it that worked that way. So I suppose whatever curse they laid upon me was just simply amplifying the certain rules that has already worked.
Mm-hmm.
But
Still, though, it just kind of baffles me that you managed to get an ocean deity just to pick a bone with you in particular.
I wouldn't be surprised. Over the years I go, oh hey, this person has something that could be useful to me in the future, whether or not they have a mirror shard or not, and sometimes without thinking, I'll plant a shard into them, let it grow into a flower, and take what I need to, or just interfere in various other affairs. I don't entirely remember. I don't entirely remember if I intended to. I actually don't even think I intended to interfere with their plans in particular, but they didn't like the particular mortal that I chose to take, and I didn't particularly like having the knowledge that mortal had in my head at the time.
Hmm. I guess it was very forbidden knowledge at that point.
It was at that point. I suppose it's just the whatever happens between various immortals and gods. So.
Yeah, I guess those quarrels are there. This is this and that's that.
Yeah. And you just sometimes you just find out you've accidentally scorned some other deity about something, and you don't entirely know why, and then you realize, oh, I suppose I did do something like that a couple thousand years ago.
Eh,
Or
but
they have a pawn that they're are expecting to accomplish great works, and over the course of various domino steps, and it turns out I planted a seed one of them and consume their mind. What can I say?
mm-hmm. And I've also picked up another thing too. You've mentioned like a couple times a hunter. Who is this hunter?
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So naturally over the years I've dealt with various monster hunters monster and demon hunters across cultures, catching wind of my presence and using various means and knowledges to deal with me. This current this most recent case was my last life, in which I suppose a more just modern, what you would describe just a modern occultist demon hunter cut wind of my presence, researched what they could about me, and forged another bullet from one of a poor bystander, one who just seemed to be happy to live their life full of very lovely but not very useful knowledge. and using one of the shards that I'd either lost or had been separated from me from the beginning, use that to torture and prepare that host so that their bullet would cause similar massive damage to me. Something about the way that the shards resonate psychically once they're a part of the body after they've been treated like that and then forcibly pushed into me, causes massive corruption and failure in other shards in my body. I don't think that this one was associated with any local group, with any ancient orders or groups or defenders. I think I've just been a freelancing occultist mercenary.
Mm-hmm.
If I get an opportunity, I suppose I'll probably take vengeance about it at some point.
Yeah. All right. Any further questions, everybody? I'll just give one more minute.
Yeah. Go ahead and let me have it. Let's see.
How do encounters with other shapeshifters usually go? A question from Jidori.
Let's see. Encounters with other shapeshifters. So while I take very much pride in how I can disguise the physical appearance and maintain and keep my energy from being contained and detected unless I really use it, there's naturally parts of me that aren't quite perfect fits for a human, which is why I often like to disguise as outcasts and hermits. Sometimes I run into a completely unrelated unrelated entity. Sometimes some powerful, some just minding their own business. And I must say that's often very very interesting because some of the more common ones will sometimes wonder if I'm one of theirs, even if they can't entirely tell why. I don't feel like one of theirs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's been at least one point in which another shape-shifting deity, another completely unrelated shape-shifting deity has assumed to mimic my form for various purposes. I have to say that was not fun. I don't entirely remember what I did to upset them either, but they decided that using my form to cast blame and attention my way was going to work perfectly for them.
Hmm.
Oh yes. Other than that, though, I haven't minded the chance encounters I've had with the shapeshifters. I have tried to keep the exact nature of my being hidden from them as well, but when I do, and keep it with the assumption that I am one of whatever they are, but it has been very fun to interact with with someone else who has very similar struggles and experiences.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I guess this is pretty much the end of the show here.
All right.
Thank you, Shu, for stopping on by and being a guest.
Thank you, Sarah, for having me, and thank you, Chad, for being here and all your lovely questions.
Now,
and if anyone else ever come, sorry.
Sorry, I was just about to ask. Do you have anything planned later on, or anything you plan on doing for the future?
Let's see. For shooting plans, or just other like content plans? Is that what you're asking, or
just in general? If anything, stream, anything, any events, or is anything you plan on doing somewhere down the line, stuff like that.
Okay. If it's our, it was yeah. Sure, thanks both of those. Yes, yeah. I do plan on having a. Sorry.
No worries.
A donathon in which I'm going to speed paint the speed paint miniatures on the 15th, the Ides of March, for stuff. If that's anything that anyone would be interested in. Also, I am expecting a redesign while the character will still be functioning the same into certain design elements, or just to adjust certain design elements and plan for when I inevitably shift towards planning out my life. I have 2D, so do keep an eye out for that if that's something of your interest.
And do you also have like a farewell message that you usually have?
Nothing quite set in stone, but I do want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you all have a lovely rest of time.
All right. That's it. So, thanks everybody for stopping on by. Hope you had a wonderful time with the stream. I will likely be trying to pick a bone with Apocalypse Bird again with Library of Ruina.
Oh goodness. Best of luck.
So I'm gonna cut down the stream real quick and then just gonna be back up maybe sometime around like 10 or so. 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I just need to psychologically prepare myself for that. But all in all, do appreciate you stopping on by, and if you have any other guests that you might want to recommend as well for In Character Universe, send them my way.
All right. I'll keep it in mind. Thank you very much again. I wish you luck on. I wish you luck on Apocalypse Bird.
Thank you. I'm gonna need it.
In the current Loveport run, I've gotten 2 of the birds, except for Punishing Bird. And I saw the second one after I got the first one. I was like, ooh, what if I just tempt Fate right now?
So far,
It's going to be.
Sorry, what was it?
Let's see. It would be very bad and might just end the run, but wouldn't it be very funny to show off to on stream what happens?
As someone who has Melting Love and Queen of Hatred on stream, I'm pretty sure that was the end of the run right there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I saw the Plague Doctor and I was like, this is going to end very badly, but I think it'd be very funny to show off what will happen.
Be not afraid. Be not afraid.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for this. That was a lot of fun.
Yep.
I do hope to see you around, mate. Maybe I'll pop back in to see how the apocalypse or we'll pop back into your chat to see or stream to see how the apocalypse goes for the apocalypse bird goes for you.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.